everybody once again. Welcome back. We had a 1-month break in this series, so now we're back again, back on schedule. Today, as you know, we're going to be hearing about Mars from the person who's probably the most competent to talk about it, the scientific secretary to ISRO. He can talk about the mission and the objectives and everything about it. Next month, that is 1st of August, if I'm not mistaken, the first Friday, we're going to have Dr. Rathore, the DG of Meteorological Department, talking about climate and climate modeling. So that would also be an interesting talk. For people who are new to this series, who have come here for the first time, I'll just say a couple of words about it. This is a series of talks on science and technology, popular talks on science and technology, which are held every first Friday of the month at 6:30, same venue. So, we have had this for about 15, 16 months, every month, first Friday of the month. So, and the next few talks are Dr. Rathore in August, as I said, and then Professor Nalin Pant from IIT to talk about dance of the molecules, synthetic chemistry in September. Then Professor Sanjay Jain from Delhi University talking about social networks and networks in biology, basically network theory. That was in October. And so on. So without further ado, I'll leave you with our chairperson, Professor Dr. V. Siddharth, who will talk more about it. We'll introduce this.
Thank you very much, Robert. Welcome to all of you. My name is Siddhartha. I was sort of corralled into this operation, so to speak, because I had an association with ISRO and Professor Satish Dhawan. More or less started that department from 1972 onwards. I was joined in 74, since known Dr. Koteshwar Rao since then. Very briefly, and briefly means that big. Dr. Koteshwar Rao is a distinguished scientist at ISRO, and he graduated in electronics and communications engineering from Andhra University, an M.Tech in instrumentation and control systems from Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University, and then he joined ISRO, a satellite center in Bangalore where the satellites are designed and fabricated. Scientific Secretary of ISRO, he has been playing a key role in policy planning, long-term planning and so on. It's a legacy from what was known as the Systems Planning and Analysis Group set up by Professor Satish Dhawan in 1974. And then he was involved in developing electro-optical attitude sensors for several satellite programs of ISRO. These are extraordinarily sensitive and what might be called high science. It's not really so much the technology part, although that's also very significant, unless you know the fundamentals of things like surface chemistry and so on. There's nothing very much you can do in electro-optics. He developed star sensors, sun sensors, and earth sensors, which he's a sensors man, and probably as a consequence will be talking a great deal more sense than I am at the present moment of time. He was director of the Electro-Optical Systems Laboratory, the fiber optic gyro man, and for those of you who are familiar with gyroscopes, and you will understand what a solid-state gyroscope is all about, and why it is so important in missions of this kind that he's going to be talking about, and some others. And was involved in the ultraviolet imaging telescope for the Indian Astro Satellite project. In other words, optics-based, both visible and presumably ultraviolet. And as director of the semiconductor laboratory, which was SCL earlier in Chandigarh, which had been burned down quite deliberately by certain enemies of our state, and he reset it up, and then Department of Space more or less took it over after it was burned down and rebuilt. It's a long story, one which some of the younger people here must be given some details about at some later stage, that we are not past the stage of sabotage of our scientific and technological programs that might threaten others. From April of 2003 to August 2009, he was project director of the Indian multi-wavelength space observatory satellite called AstroSat. And during this period, he integrated and harnessed the scientific and technical capabilities of many institutes like ISRO, TIFR, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, IUCAA in Pune, and the Raman Research Institute in Bangalore. And he was also instrumental in more ways than one, and the pun being entirely intended, in forging international collaboration with ISRO, India, Canada, etc. He's a fellow of the Institution of Engineers, various telecommunications, member of the Instrument Society of India, and I suppose rather happy that I don't attend its meetings, an International Microelectronics and Packaging Society, and he's of course a member of the International Academy of Astronautics by election. Without any further ado, all of you have heard from the newspapers, and many of you probably have been following the PSLV launch, obviously not for the Mars mission, but for the other recent one 2 days ago. I really don't have anything further to say except to use an American expression in somewhat reverse. You've gone a long way, baby. So, Dr. Koteshwar Rao will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and thereafter we'll have some questions.
Thank you, sir. Respected Dr. Siddhartha, Professor Shobhit Mahajan, respected elders, ladies and gentlemen. Let me confess, I am a little nervous today because Siddhartha is here. He is my guru's guru. So you can imagine my nervousness when I have to speak in front of him. The purpose of today's talk is not a great science or a technology. I would like to take all of you through the journey which ISRO has gone through. So all of you know ISRO has got many facets. Under one umbrella, we develop launch vehicles, we develop satellites, we develop the applications of the space products, and also we do space exploration. And under the space exploration, we have done the first mission, that is Chandrayaan-1 in 2008. And the discovery of the water molecules on the surface of the moon from Chandrayaan-1 was indeed a real booster for Indian space program in the country as well as in the world. Elated by that, and also considering the fact that the Advisory Committee on Sciences in its decadal plan has suggested that ISRO should take up mission to Mars. Of course, the human quest for knowing the unknown is eternal. We will have many questions regarding the universe, regarding the human race, where from we came, how Earth came into existence, whether we are going to live for a long time, if so, how much is the time? These are all the questions, but answers are very few, and science always tries to address few of these questions. And the more and more we know, the more and more we know how much we don't know. And let me put it this way, my talk will be basically on these lines. Why we have selected for Mars for exploration? Of course, the obvious reason what we feel is it is the most Earth-like planet on one hand. So accordingly, to know some part of the Mars, we have defined our mission objectives, and then I will take you through the journey, what we have done, how we have conceived this mission, and how in a limited scope of the time given to us, and also the fact that we have decided to do it indigenously, how we have selected the science instruments that are the payloads on this mission, and how we have developed the spacecraft. And also I will tell you how we planned the launch on our launch vehicle PSLV, and how innovatively we have gone around the earth many times to raise the altitude of the apogee of this spacecraft, then left the earth in order to go in Mars with the limited capability of the PSLV. And during the cruising phase, what we did and where we are presently, and of course in future, the Mars orbit insertion. The fundamental questions on Mars is, of course, one is what is its composition, what is the climate, historically whether any changes are there, and the important question is, has there been a life on Mars? It is $1 million question. Nobody knows for certain. When I say life, it need not be human life. It would be primitive bacteria also. And what is the geology? And if there are resources, what is their inventory available on the Mars? Of course, should Mars be the next destination? Of course, there are fantasies that we can build colonies there, we can live there. And there is a perception that liquid water still exists there, may be trapped underneath the surface of the Mars. These are all the general questions, but we may not be able to answer all of these questions through our own Mars orbiter spacecraft, but still we can do a reasonably good science through this mission, though the mission's challenge is a technological challenge first, to go to Mars and orbit around the Mars. When I say it is the most Earth-like planet, what are the reasons? See, if you see, it is not very far away from Sun, and its length of the day is almost 24 hours, slightly above, where Earth's day is 124 hours, and the tilt axis is almost same, and the length of the year is double to that of our Earth, and of course size-wise, radius-wise, it is half of the Earth's radius. But the fundamental difference is the gravity is there, is less than half, and the number of satellites what it has got are 2, where we have got one satellite, that is the Moon. And the next similarity is, you look at some of the surface features. If nobody tells us, and if we just look at some of the pictures of Mars, they just resemble the surface of Earth. And of course, there are bigger canyons than on Earth, and much higher activity volcanoes are there, whereas our polar caps are permanently covered with water ice. The Mars is perceived to be covered with carbon dioxide ice and with a question mark water ice. And the surface temperature is average temperature minus 63, though it has it goes at poles to almost minus 153 degrees centigrade. That is the most difficult condition to live there. If you see the atmosphere of Mars, predominantly from the previous measurements what were taken, it is almost 95% of that is carbon dioxide, whereas on Earth we have predominantly nitrogen. But if you see the oxygen component, it is very low. So putting a question mark on the survival of human beings there. And the atmosphere is very thin. And the Height at which it is there is slightly more than on Earth, where on Earth you find it at 7 kilometer altitude. On Mars it is almost 11 kilometer altitude, and accordingly the atmospheric pressure is very, very less. And if you see, there are many attempts to go to Mars. If you see all around the orbiters, they are crowded, and inside some Anderson rovers are there from various countries. And if you see, this chart says one needs lot of guts to take up this mission, Mars mission. Right from the beginning, where it started with Russian mission, if you take till now, all put together, the flybys, orbiters, landers, rovers, everything put together, there were 51 attempts and hardly 21 have succeeded, giving a 40% of the success rate. And if you see, statistically, the red is where you see launch failures. Predominantly in the initial stages, all failures were during the birth itself. They did not take birth. They failed in the launch itself. And some are spacecraft failures, and some are miscellaneous, like some missions have lost communication with Earth. And successes are only 40%. But if you see the bottom graph, it is a decadal profile wherein the first 2 decades they are predominantly losses. So probably the missions got reduced in the 3rd decade because of these failures. Then also they failed. But if you see the 5th decade, the successes are more than failures. What it means is probably the learning phase is over and people started understanding the technology and the mission operations. But if you go to the next decade, it is not very bright again because of the Russian launcher failed for Phobos front. And right now there are 2 missions which are shown on the extreme right, that is India's Mars orbiter spacecraft and US MAVEN, which are cruising towards the Mars. The mission objectives what we have set for Mars, as I told, are predominantly technology objectives to design and realize a spacecraft which can be launched through the Indian capable PSLV launcher and accordingly devise a novel mission, how you go around Earth, then take off and go towards Mars. And of course, we had experience with our deep space network at Bailalu to communicate to the moon mission. But compared to moon mission, this is much more far off. We have to go a long way. And we have to develop deep space communication and also navigation, mission planning. These are the new things. And how to manage the mission and learning. And I will come to the details. A lot of autonomy has to be built into the mission because of the communication delay, because of the pure distance. And also, having done this, once we reach Mars and orbit around that, we had a limited science objective also to explore the surface features and morphology and mineralogy with 5 scientific instruments, which I will be dealing with at a later stage. Then what we did, first we have to conceive the mission. As I told, we took a leaf from the report of the Decadal Plan of Advisory Committee, which is headed by Professor U.R. Rao. And once we had a feeling that we should take up this Mars mission, we have constituted a study committee with Dr. V. Adimurthy, who is a mission expert. And the team recommended that we should take that earliest opportunity at the time, that was 2013, because this opportunity repeats every 26 months because of the geometry of the Earth, Mars and Sun. And November 2013 was the target put. Then we went through the process of discussing in ISRO Council, subsequently in Space Council, Space Commission. And finally, after all Space Commission approvals and all that, we were waiting for the approval from the government. And on August 15th, 2012, on Independence Day, from Red Fort, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has announced the Mars mission, and we took off from there. And after designing the mission, we have to have the scientific instruments. So we called for expression of interest across the country. 33 proposals we have received. Out of that, some are ambitious, which could not be done in the real time, because time also plays a major role, because you have to launch the mission in 2013. Then we have selected 9 payloads out of that and given them deadlines. So finally, when we have put the cutoff date, by the time we could get 5, I would say, reasonably good instruments, predominantly to use for atmospheric studies and particle studies in the atmosphere, and of course for imaging the surface. And one of them is a Lyman alpha photometer, wherein you measure the ratio of the deuterium and hydrogen which is getting expelled from the atmosphere. So when you measure this ratio, it gives the process, escape process of the atmosphere, and it may lead to some clues about the water on the surface of the Mars. The second challenge is whether we can measure methane availability on the Mars. There were plenty of ground experiments by USA. They went for almost 2-3 years. They have almost decided methane is there. And then suddenly when they started publishing, there were counter arguments that it is not methane, but it is another isotope of carbon, that is C13 or something like that. Then the whole thing collapsed there. But really nobody went to Mars and measured methane. But the difficulty here is the perceived concentration of methane there is almost 10 to 20 parts per billion. So you should have a very high sensitive instrument to measure that. And this instrument has been developed by Space Applications Center at Ahmedabad. And we hope that if at all methane is there, of that concentration of 10 to 20 parts per billion, we could detect. And the other one is a exospheric neutral composition analyzer, which measures various components of the upper atmosphere. And also we have a thermal infrared imaging spectrometer, where even without illuminating the surface of the Mars, we can get the features and we can map it, and also we can probably derive the emissivity of the surface of the Mars. And this is done in 12 bands in thermal infrared. And also we have a small camera on the Mars orbiter spacecraft to image the surface of the Mars. These are the 5 instruments which we have selected and which are flown on Mars orbiter spacecraft. And the major challenges when we conceived this mission is, one is propulsion system. See what happens normally, this is a technical jargon, we call it an argument of Parisi. It is an orbital parameter. If we have to spend the least energy to go to Mars and insert, the argument of Parisi should be of the order of 280 degrees, whereas in our normal missions, it is 180 degrees. So it puts a constraint on the launch vehicle that it should coast for a long time and then release the satellite. This is a new thing which we have done in this. So the propulsion, another difficulty is we have a engine that we call it engine, that is nothing but a small rocket. Once we use it for the arbitraging operations in the initial period, then we shut it off. Then it cruises to Mars over a period of 10 months. And at the end of the 10 months, again when we reach Mars, we have to apply a brake so that it goes around Mars. And to apply the brake, again we have to fire this engine. This was the first time we are doing. After 10 months of cold storage, we have to fire that engine and it has to fire. And of course we have done the laboratory tests, we have qualified this for such a long storage. This is another challenge. Of course, navigation. Whatever missions we had so far, they are all two-body or three-body equations, wherein the gravity of either moon, sun, earth act on the spacecraft. But when you travel long distance towards Mars, almost all the planets' effect will be there on this. So this is a new thing for our mission people to calculate this trajectory under the influence of all the planet gravities. And of course, the communication system, as I told, when we reach the Mars for insertion, it is almost at 220 to 30 million kilometers. And the mission life what we have conceived is almost 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, the distance further increases to 375 million kilometers. So this takes a long time for the radio communication. This long time we have to manage, and also we have to communicate over a long distance. That means you need the ground stations with higher power. This is what we have configured. And of course spacecraft autonomy, as I told, because if you have to communicate, suppose it takes 4 or 5 minutes to one-way signal, you give a command here, it goes after 5 minutes, and if you want to see that has taken place or not, that action, it takes another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If something happens in between, you don't have any knowledge on the spacecraft. So we have built an autonomy, how the spacecraft can survive on its own in terms of a minor faults like a component failure or a subsystem failure. What we did is the fault detection, isolation and reconfiguration. Automatically we detect the fault where it is, isolate that component, bring the redundant component and reconfigure it. This is what we have done. Of course, earlier also we had this autonomy, but it was to a limited extent, whereas here to a large extent it has to survive on its own without any ground intervention. Then technical challenges, I told the argument of Parisi already. And because of this long coasting, we had another problem. Normally, the rocket is monitored over ground stations spread over all over the world. All of them are land-based terminals, tracking stations. In this case, what happened? After tracking from Brunei Island and Biak in Indonesia, we had a large coasting phase over the South Pacific Ocean. We have to know what is happening to the launch vehicle. So we have deployed 2 ship terminals located in the Pacific Ocean to track the trajectory of the PSLV. You can see this is the ship movement. 2 ships, INS Nalanda and INS Yamuna, were deployed for this purpose. And of course, the 30-meter antenna at Bailalu at Bangalore is the mainstay for our deep space communication. And then we have to develop the spacecraft. Then I will show you some pictures in between so that how we have integrated the satellite, you will get some idea. Of course, these are common for any satellite, not necessarily for Mars. Mars, The mass of the satellite is almost 1340 kgs, which could be launched by PSLV. This also puts some limitation on the payloads what we select, because the heavier weight cannot go in this. Even if you put heavier weight, you may not be able to do great science, because the carrying that weight itself you need again the liquid engine higher capacity. It is a compromise between all these things. And of course these are all the common subject: structure, mechanism, propulsion, thermal, power by solar panels and battery, and attitude and orbit control system to orient in the required direction, and to communicate, command, telemetry. All these are part of any spacecraft. And this is how it looks in the rocket when it is put. And this is the on-orbit configuration. In rocket, when you put the solar panel, what you are seeing on the left side, and the antenna on the right side, they will be in the closed condition, because you have to gain the volume. Once you go to orbit, you deploy them, solar panel starts generating power, and the antenna starts communicating. And in this spacecraft, we had three types of antennas. One is called a low gain antenna, a medium gain antenna, and a high gain antenna. You may be asking me why three are required. The low gain antenna is omnidirectional, because initially spacecraft could be in any direction, so we can communicate with that. Whereas when you go for high range, what you need is a bigger dish, and not only that, it is a directional antenna, so that the entire power is concentrated in one direction. The advantage is you can communicate over a long distance. The disadvantage is if any orientation disturbance is there, you cannot communicate. So this combination of these three antennas we use judiciously during the cruise phase. And of course, we have realized all these elements for the spacecraft. Then you can see, first we start with the main structure. Centrally there is a cylinder. Around that all the panels will be coming. And then the propulsion system, the tank on the top side, what you are seeing, it is getting inserted, that is a fuel tank. And this is all some components of wheels, gyros and all that. Then this is a panel. Out of the four side panels, one of the panel is getting assembled. We call it disassembled mode test. Each panel we populate and test it. Then of course these are the 5 payloads which I have mentioned, where they are located. Payloads are assembled after that. Then we start closing panels one by one. Then do one assembled mode test after all the panels are closed. Then you put it in a space simulation chamber, where you create vacuum conditions and the thermal conditions and test it for space. And we do some thermal balance test. Then we do what I told, the antenna deployment and panel deployment. We test whether they are functionally okay or not. Then after deploying, we illuminate the solar panels and see the power is getting generated or not. Then we measure the physical parameters. What is the size, weight, what is the moment of inertia. This is for dynamic attitude orientation calculations. And then we do electromagnetic interference tests on the spacecraft. This is how the Mars orbiter spacecraft is built. Then coming to the mission, so what you do after building it? Then we have to launch it on PSLV C-25, and we have to go around the Earth and boost the distance from one orbit to another orbit. Then slowly you give escape velocity so that it escapes from the Earth, and then it goes out of the sphere of influence of Earth. That means the gravity of Earth no more acts on that. Then the trajectory, once in a while you have to make a small correction. For that means you have to continuously monitor the trajectory and give a small correction if it is required. Then arrive at Mars and insert it. This is the mission operation. So now if you see, on PSLV, on 5th November 2013, we have launched Mars Orbiter spacecraft from Sriharikota, the spaceport of India. And of course, we have gone through this earthbound maneuvers gradually. And on 1st December, finally, the spacecraft left Earth. And on the way, so far we have done 2 small trajectory corrections. One was done in December. The other one recently on June 11th we have done. Continuously we will monitor. If it is required, we will do one more in August and maybe 10 days or 12 days before inserting into the Martian orbit we will do once more. And 24th September 2014 is the D-Day for insertion into Mars orbit. And this is the photograph of how it is launched. And there is a small video. Let me see whether it plays.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
This is the countdown. Normally you are familiar with that.
2, 1, 0, plus 1, 2, 3. Lift off, normal.
प्रक्षेपण सफलता very fantastic study is alive with the real tracking lift off. It is really, you can see the day is going, how steadily it is going. आप बड़ी आसानी से देख पा रहे होंगे 6 प्रक्षेपण स्टेपन प्रज्वलित होते हुए सीधे आकाश की ओर अपने प्रतल पर और हम बाकायदा उसकी आवाज अपने कानों तक सुन पा रहे हैं. Now, the sound, the acoustic levels of the vehicle going up with high speed is coming, and the whole mission control center is reverberating with the voice, with the sounds that have emanated from the liftoff. You can see steadily the launch vehicle proceed.
Somebody has to help me.
Not working.
Next slide it is.
Bring it to.
Thank you. So these are the orbit raising operations which I told. Initially PSLV has put it at 23,000 kilometers, and gradually we raised the orbit to almost 2 lakh kilometers. This is what is depicted in this diagram. And when we were orbiting around Earth, we wanted to test some of the payloads. The interesting thing, the camera which is on the Mars mission, we oriented towards Earth and we took the image. This is on November 19th. This is at a distance of almost 68,000 kilometers. And this is how the Earth looks. And luckily that day it was looking at India, and we could take the map of India. So why I am projecting this is, when we go to Mars, the orbit is a highly elliptical orbit. The nearest point is almost 400 kilometers, and the farthest point is 80,000 kilometers. And this picture is taken at almost 70,000 kilometers. So when you are at the highest altitude of 80,000 kilometers, you can expect a quality of this from the Mars surface. This is with what we call a pixel resolution of 3.5 kilometers. On the other hand, when you are nearer to the Mars, that is at 400 kilometers, the resolution what you get is 20 meters. So now we can imagine what quality picture we will get from this camera when we go to Mars. And of course this is the mission trajectory, as I have told already. After going through 6 orbit raising maneuvers, on December 1st we left Earth. And this is the path which it takes. This is the path of Earth, and this is the path of Mars. And right now somewhere here we are, and we have to reach here. That will happen on September 24th. And in between we had 2 mid-course corrections and 2 more we are planning. This is to depict how it went through the influence of Earth and escaped it. And this is how it looks when it goes to Mars. This is the orbit. And when we have launched this, the media coverage is extensive, and you can see these are all the websites in the electronic media, and the print media also there was a lot of coverage. And incidentally, the first Facebook of ISRO we have started after the Mars launch, that is on 22nd October. And by December, we got almost 3 lakh likes on this. And this was the 5th most popular site in 2013. I think after Narendra Modi, Sachin Tendulkar, Apple iPad, and the present RBI governor. This is the response which we got. And interesting thing, the students, right from school students onwards, you can see a letter which is written by a 5th standard student, how he got motivated and how he expressed his wish to join ISRO. And this letter got 12,000 likes. And this is one of the example. One night we were doing the operation, and we encountered a small problem. We did not respond on the Facebook immediately. Within 1 minute, you see the response. What is happening? Midnight, 12 o'clock. So this is how. And now where we are. This is presently at 130 million kilometers from Earth, which takes for a communication one way almost 430 seconds. So it is a new experience for us. We are getting acquainted how to live with this communication delay. And the total distance in the curved path, we have to travel 680 million kilometers total. So far we have covered 510 million kilometers. These numbers are yesterday's numbers. And of course, as I told, the D-Day is 24th September. And we really feel proud that this mission we have done within a span of less than 2 years and with a cost of 450 crores, which recently Prime Minister, when he spoke at Sriharikota after our PSLV 23 launch, he told it costs less than a movie cost, the named Gravity. So this is the type of encouragement which we get. So with your all best wishes, I feel we will be successful in setting it into Mars on September 24th. If we do that, we will be the first country to do it on maiden attempt. And we will be the first country in Asia to go to Mars. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Well, really exciting. Thank you so very much, Dr. Koteshwar Rao. And with, what straightforwardness he related a story which would be, which would enthuse the whole country, and I suppose it does. And I dare say there will be other occasions and other audiences to which he will be giving this talk, particularly for young people. But the point should have come across to you about the nature of the mission. And he mentioned one name, which many of you may not have heard of, a man called Adimurti, who was the designer of the mission. No ordinary human being. Let me tell you, There's one other point that he didn't possibly mention and may not be able to, but I'll come to that in a minute. But I'd like to take a minute over Adimurti. Many of you who have been watching these launches from Sriharikota would have noticed in the last two launches, not excepting this one a few days ago, but the two launches previous to that, they were delayed by a few minutes each. And it was mentioned that they had been delayed a few minutes each because of flying debris which could have hit the spacecraft, I mean the PSLV as it went through the atmosphere. Now, how do we know that there is passing debris, and how do we calculate that minute or minute and a half that we have to delay the launch of the spacecraft so that we don't hit that passing debris? And the man who does that kind of work is Adimurti. It's no surprise that he was at the mission planning stage. And the slingshot maneuver, which was used so as to accelerate the spacecraft, was a very unique way of using the gravity in more ways than one, including the movie, to get to Mars with the least amount of energy for release from the ground on Earth. Thank you so very much, Dr. Koteshwar Rao. I would like to divide the phase of the interaction into two. If there are any questions with regard to something that was mentioned by Dr. Koteshwar Rao, which you didn't understand, a technical point, for example, kindly raise that question. And I can request Dr. Koteshwar Rao to answer it from a technical viewpoint. And once that is over, we will get to some larger questions with regard to the mission as a whole, purpose, and so on and so forth. So if there are any questions with regard to the technical point, yes.
Before that, I would like to add just one point
Please,
to what you told.
Please.
The commentary which you heard in English for that video clip is from Dr. Adimurti.
There's something there. Please.
Please wait for the mic, because this thing is being webcast.
Yeah. If you could announce your name and affiliation, if you can, please.
My name is Nilanjan Gupta. I wanted to ask, one, you talked about the time delay in the communication signal as the spacecraft goes further and further from Earth. So in case of a crisis or a malfunction on board, like NASA spacecraft, have you incorporated artificial intelligence into your systems where they are able to do self-correction and what is known as self-learning algorithms? The second question I wanted to ask is, how exactly are you ejecting the spacecraft from the successfully higher apogees and orbits around the Earth into the Mars injection orbit? Is it till the 6th orbit, by the time it reaches its highest ellipse around the Earth, is it going to reach Mars with the 6th highest elliptical orbit?
I will answer one by one.
Thank you.
The first one is, really there is no artificial intelligence on this Mars orbiter spacecraft. But what we did, we conceived all the faults which can occur in any subsystem, and we have algorithms how to detect it. Once we detect it, how to isolate that system, then bring in the redundant system into that. That is what I told: fault detection, isolation, and reconfiguration. And to make it very clear to you, when we went around the Earth so many times, all these algorithms, one by one, we have executed and checked for their autonomy. So we expect, in case we are not able to communicate with the satellite, it can survive on its own. The second level of autonomy is, even if that fails, we have what is called something safe mode in the spacecraft. The safe mode is, one is power safe, the other one is thermal safe. The power safe means automatically, irrespective of anything, if we are not going through this FDIR and stable orientation, the solar panel will be automatically turned towards sun for generating the power forever. Then in that condition, we have designed the spacecraft to be thermally stable. For any spacecraft, these two are the utmost conditions to be safe. That is the second level of autonomy. And the third level of autonomy is, in that condition, we rotate the spacecraft so that at least some time or other, the antenna, which is supposed to receive the signals, looks at the Earth located antenna. So these are the three levels of autonomy which we have built into the spacecraft. The second point is, when we are raising the orbit, okay, as Dr. Siddhartha told, we are in an innovative way using the gravity of the Earth. So we have a small rocket inside the spacecraft. So whenever you come to the nearest point, that is what we call perigee. Perigee is the nearest point to the Earth. You fire the rocket. Then it will add delta velocity to that. So it will go higher and higher. Then after 6 orbits of raising, again you give some more velocity, what we call escape velocity. The total amount, the cumulative amount of the velocity what it has got so far, with that it escapes Earth. And you orient that so that it follows a path now, not around Sun, elliptic path, but around Sun. We call it heliocentric path. Okay? That heliocentric path, when it approaches Mars, it is a hyperbolic approach. So these are the steps involved. When you go to Mars, then the speed you have to break. That means whatever velocity you have given in one direction, you have to give the velocity in the opposite direction, where the speed gets broken, and because of the Mars gravity, it goes around Mars. Suppose you miss that, it will be a flyby. It just goes, sees Mars and goes away.
Yes.
A couple of, actually 5 very
Can you
quick
mention
questions.
your name, please?
My name is Mahadevan. I'm a freelance filmmaker. 5 very quick questions. You can choose which ones you'd like to answer or which ones are relevant. One is, why is the methane concentration significant? What does it tell us? The second is, is there any danger from asteroids on the way? The third is, it's just a layman's question. Why do spacecraft, which we see, when you see any of these ISRO missions, tend to have this gold foil-like covering? What does that do? The fourth is, I can't quite understand. I mean, I can, as a layperson again, I can sort of understand the slingshot effect in relation to a spacecraft that is passing by some astral body and I guess sort of tangentially gets accelerated by the gravity of that body. But I can't understand the analogy here when it's orbiting the Earth and how the same kind of effect works. Is there, for example, a good layperson's website which can explain something like that, or could you? Finally, given the delay in communication as it goes farther and farther, you have this autonomous system on board. Does the spacecraft actually have some kind of decision-making choice? Does it know? Suppose you send a signal from here. You say, "I want you to do this." You anticipate something happening. Meanwhile, it has sort of assessed its own situation. It has decided on something. How does it know whether to use its own brain or listen to you? These are the.
Okay. It is difficult to remember the 5 questions in sequence. So let me try. One question what you asked is, what is that gold foil? See, it is nothing but a Kapton sheet, aluminized Kapton sheet. So basically, it is like, in winter, we use a blanket to cover ourselves. So it is exactly the same function. It is for thermal protection of the spacecraft. Okay, it is layers of sheet stitched together. It acts as a blanket. What is the first question? Asteroids. See, any space object, the danger will be there. But the probabilities are very, very, very less. But there is no way, if something is hitting, you cannot maneuver that and go, because whereas as he told, the around Earth and up to Geo, we have a mechanism worldwide through network of radars to find out the debris, and the debris are tracked and their orbits are predicted. That is why when our rocket goes up, if a debris probability, if it is slightly higher, that also 10 power minus 3 and all that, we try to avoid that. But when you go out of this geosynchronous orbit, which is at 36,000 kilometers and all that, there are no mechanisms to monitor debris at present. Then methane. See, on Earth, I will give you an example. Suppose you go on measuring methane. Okay, when you go over a paddy field, suddenly the methane concentration increases. Okay. Similarly, if there is a biological activity somewhere, the methane concentration increases. So, if you find more and more methane, that means you can expect more and more biological activity on the surface. But it is not so simple. It can be due to geological effect also. Suppose there is an eruption, something is happening, then also methane can come. So what we feel, if we measure methane, and we have another thermal imaging camera on that, with that, if we see the surface features in thermal infrared, which tells about the heat, that means an activity has taken place which has produced heat and methane is there, then it is geological. Suppose that activity is not there in infrared and methane is there, it may be biological.
Okay, I'll just come back to you in a minute. Yeah, please.
And thank you very much, Dr. I am H. Kumar from a science reporter. I have two questions. First of all, thank you very much for a very exposition of the payload, Indian satellite in a solar energy based system. My first question is, it is a 100% solar operated spacecraft?
100%?
100% solar operated spacecraft?
I tell you, there are two components of power sources in this. One is solar panel, other one is battery. Okay. So whenever eclipse condition is there, that means sun doesn't fall on the solar panel, the battery supplements it, but as soon as the sun comes, it provides power to the spacecraft as well as it charges the battery also.
It means it's 100%, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Another question is, how it is can be useful in the prediction of the climate change activities in India, because think globally, act locally. How it is useful to Indian population make a observation?
If you want the climate over Earth, there are plenty of other ways to do it. This is not the way. But the interaction of sun on the Mars atmosphere, if you understand, it may give a clue how sun can interact with Earth's atmosphere also.
I am Dinesh Sharma, I am a science journalist. You mentioned about the ground test which the satellite underwent, but what kind of radiation test it underwent? Because this was a different kind of a satellite which you never had. So was it the same chamber or it's something different?
The radiation is a different thing because the chamber simulates only vacuum and the thermal conditions. For radiation, what we do, the components we select radiation hardened components, and the components are tested. And incidentally, the concept I will tell you. If you go farther and farther, it is not that radiation is more and more. In fact, the radiation is more in earthbound orbits, what is called Van Allen belts. The Van Allen belt gives the highest radiation. When you are doing this 6 orbit maneuvers, every orbit maneuver, when you go through that point where it crosses Van Allen belt, it feels higher radiation. So, in this particular mission, we have crossed 48 times the Van Allen belts. So, we calculate the radiation accordingly and select the components and also design the packages, the metal thickness and such things. But after crossing that, the radiation point of view, it is much benign.
You now know why SCL is under ISRO.
Dr.
Dr. Rao, thank you for making it sound so easy. It was really quite awesome, this whole presentation. My questions are, how many times will it orbit
Can you
Mars?
give your name? You haven't. Sorry.
My name?
Yes, please.
Ranjana Kaul, and I'm a lawyer. So how many times will it orbit Mars? And at the end of, I mean, I suppose it has a mission life, what will happen to the Mangalyaan?
I will answer. One orbit around Mars in Earth days, it takes roughly 3 days and odd. Okay. Then we are planning the mission for 180 days. Okay. That means 60 times it will go around Mars. So any satellite, when we say life, it is only the orbit maintenance using the leftover fuel in the tank. Even it is applicable for Earth orbits also. But we have seen normally engineers are very conservative. Okay, they calculate assuming all sorts of disturbances on the spacecrafts. But if you go by experience, all our remote sensing satellites, the design life is 5 years. But we have seen some of them going for 8-10 years also, because the attitude disturbance conditions and orbit disturbance decay conditions are much more benign than what you design for worst case conditions. So this can go much beyond 180 days. That is first point. The second point is, any spacecraft which is orbiting around a body, when it cannot be maintained in the orbit, slowly it decays. It happens around Earth also. When it starts decaying, it takes very long time to come to the atmosphere of Earth if it is a earthbound thing. When it enters into atmosphere of Earth, a lot of heat is generated because of the atmospheric friction. So then normally it gets burnt and breaks into small pieces. Debris automatically. Okay. So that is what is called space debris there. Okay, Earth. So that is what we monitor, and but it is not dangerous because it gets into small pieces. As a whole, it will not survive the atmosphere.
But it won't get pulled by Mars gravity?
That's what I'm telling. It gets pulled, but a slow decay will be there. After a very long time, it comes.
My name is Pranab Rai. I'm a retired civil servant. First of all, congratulations to ISRO, as well as very illuminative talk by you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, sir.
My questions are larger issues. Of course, it is one of the most challenging missions from the scientific angle ever undertaken by an Indian organization. I wish to know what exactly additional information you would get out of this mission, which has already not been collected by the 21 successful missions before. Can you please elucidate how we expect these to be useful, not only for immediate benefit of mankind, but in the future for technology and science and technology as a whole? Thank you.
The first thing what other missions have not done and what this mission is going to do is the measurement of methane. Measurement of methane. And if it is really there, then it is a real revelation that on the Mars. The other thing is, any number of missions you go, what happens in the timeline, how the atmospheric components are varying. Okay, it is not that if somebody has measured 10 years back, that you should not measure it again, because atmosphere will be changing with time. Whether it is changing or not itself is a revelation, and if it is changing, how it is changing, and if you extrapolate from over a period of time, you may get some scientific result out of that.
I'm Sanat Kaul. One issue is about the solar power, which I wanted to ask, because the more you go towards Mars, you are going further away from the sun. So, what is the strength of sun around that side that you can generate solar power? Or are you using some other thing? Or you are using only batteries?
Sir, you are right. Compared to Earth orbit, when you go to Mars, it is almost, I can say approximately half the power you get. So, you must have seen, if you just see Chandrayaan and Mars orbiter spacecraft, spacecrafts are almost similar. If you see in the diagram what I have shown, the panels, number of panels are 3 here. In Chandrayaan, number of panels are 2. So we compensate it by increasing the area.
My name is Bhavya Lal. Question is from announcement to launch. It was under 2 years, as you said. How did you design, build, and launch it so quickly? Are there some specific sort of scientific things or organizational and management things you did that helped?
You're talking about ISRO.
You are absolutely right. We did some innovation there. Let me tell you. Because in ISRO, most of the subsystems we don't specifically build for a particular mission. So we adopt the modular systems for spacecrafts to the extent possible. So here, apart from the technological challenges what I told, the remaining systems, suppose power conditioning unit or attitude and orbit control system or a spacecraft sensor, these are all subsystem modules which were readily available at any given time in ISRO. So we adopt that as much as possible, and mission specific we concentrate and realize in the time required. That is how we managed this.
In this particular case about reinventing the wheel, they had to do that because one of the wheels had to be reinvented so that the orientation of the spacecraft was okay. Yes, yes.
What is the current status of space biology in India?
No, we'll come to that in a minute. Anybody about the spacecraft? We'll talk about space biology in a minute.
Had we waited and planned for landing on Mars, vehicle landing on Mars, wouldn't that have been better? Or just the orbiting?
I tell you, the complex device, the missions are like this. The lowest complex mission is a flyby mission. The next one is an orbiter. In orbiter, with a highly elliptical orbit is easier. If you have to have a circular orbit, it is still more difficult. Difficult in the sense you need bigger and bigger launch vehicles. Okay? Then suppose you want to land, you need much bigger power of the launch vehicle. The next step is to collect something from Mars surface and bring it back. This is the next step. So the complexity goes on increasing.
Any other questions? Yes.
Good evening, sir. My name is Abhimanyu Gupta, and it's an honor to stand in front of you. I just want to ask this one question: that when spacecraft leaves the orbital of Earth, and like if Earth is here and Mars is here, and before it comes in the proximity of Mars, doesn't it gets pulled by the gravity of the sun? And the second question that I want to ask is that, being a pharmacist, I want to ask this question: that how can we define life? Because why do we?
Hang on. That question will be answered along with the other one, which was asked a short while ago. Stick to the Mars mission at the moment. We'll get to the other point in a minute.
So the first question, you are absolutely right. Sun also will have attraction. Mars also will have attraction. As I already told, not only Sun and Mars. On the way, all the planets will have influence on this. So that force we have to take into account and calculate the trajectory and follow the trajectory. That is the mission.
By gravitation, not astrology. Yeah.
My name is
Dr. Ramachandran. Now, about this trajectory correction that you plan to do, and two that have been already done, I want to know what is the kind of tolerance you wait for before you actually do the correction? Because originally you had announced that the second correction would be done in April,
Correct.
but you could wait till June to do this.
Correct.
So what is the kind of tolerance you accept before you actually do it?
I will tell you. Sir, after traveling this 680 million kilometers, on September 24th, we have to be away from Mars surface by 500 kilometers. Okay. On that, we give a tolerance of 50 kilometers. That means 450 to 550 is acceptable. If we find during this trajectory it is going to deviate from that, we do the correction. Till that time we will not do. So what we planned in April, that means conditions were much more benign. So it did not need a trajectory correction. That means it was within that band of 500 plus minus 50 kilometers.
50 kilometers and millions of kilometers.
680 million kilometers.
You have difficulty getting the car out of this place here in IIC. Any other questions relating to the mission?
The only power source of the spacecraft is the solar cells?
No, there are also batteries, and the batteries function when the solar cells are not in operation or when it is out of the sun, and then the solar cells back up, charge the batteries, and that's how that goes. So the solar cell is the primary
Main
source.
power is solar cells only.
You are not planning any spacecraft with radioisotope power?
Pluton.
There are two issues. One is the technology issue. The other one is ethical issue. So I don't want to talk on that, but there are two issues there.
Secondly, once the mission completes, it will ultimately decay into orbit and crash into Mars or disintegrate in the Martian atmosphere?
With that atmospheric density also, I think it will disintegrate. It will not come as a single piece.
And that will be in 4 years or in 1 year?
It depends on the drag which it experiences.
What life expectancy do you expect?
No, life is different.
No. What he means is, what is the life expectancy even after it's dead in orbit?
That could be
the cadaver is going to take how long before?
I don't know the exact number, but it is several years.
Okay.
That's fine. No. You've asked a question. Any other person who hasn't answered? Yes, please. Yeah.
My name is M.B. Chandar. In the case of Chandrayaan also, the media and the ISRO was projecting positive response till the end, but it was partially success only. In this case also, is ISRO hiding any information, or it's still now win-win situation?
Let me answer. We have never hidden any information in Chandrayaan also. The partial success or partial failure is a view, but we have never hidden any information, and we are not going to hide any information.
Any other question with respect to the mission? Okay, somebody was asking some question about life, I think. Somebody? Yeah.
Space biology.
Space biology. There was another life question? Yeah, we'll take the two life questions together. Yeah, space biology.
I visited Russian space research center. They had this algal cells.
No, please use the mic and announce
they
your
brought
name.
To the algal cells.
Name again, please.
I am Dr. Elamalai from University of Madras. So they have taken the algal cells to the space and for the recycle of carbon dioxide, oxygen, this thing. Along with the zero gravity, how the metabolism is working out and the enzymatic systems, growth and so on and so forth. So is there any program like in India?
There are two things what you asked. How biological things behave in space, that is one thing. Then space itself, whether biological things are there. There are two things. The one is, as you told, there are several experiments going on, how a plant grows, how a rat lives or something like that. What we did in one of our space recovery experiments, what is called SRE-1, we did not concentrate on this biology aspect. What we did, some metallurgical experiment we did, how the structure forms under almost zero gravity condition in a furnace. That was the experiment done. And the next SRE2, there is a plan to take a tray with seeds and how they germinate. This is the first part. The second part is whether anything is there, living there. Okay. We had balloon experiments, not satellite. Okay. And one of the balloon experiments, they found 3 types of bacteria which are up to now not known to be living on Earth. Okay. Still experiments are going, because if you want to convince the scientific community, you have to prove beyond doubt that they are from there. The mere fact that they were not seen on Earth so far is not enough to tell that it has not gone from Earth and came back. Okay. But on satellite, if you want to do, that is a different aspect. Balloon experiments are done. And also I heard there is a plan on balloon. What they do, they go to some height, collect it, bring it back, and because they are all very sterile equipments and all that, because you should not carry it and bring it back.
Okay.
I have a related question to what amounts to extraterrestrial, matter being taken from Earth into outer space.
Can you use the mic, please? Yeah.
So is that exposed? Will this tray containing the seeds and so on be exposed to the atmosphere or to the environment in space to see what will happen to it?
No.
No.
Only zero gravity condition, how it behaves.
And the
That is
second part
experiment.
is getting these, whatever was on the balloon back to Earth to see what it is. Now,
Because
you don't know how it's going to act. I mean, there's something called the Manfred Lab space moot that happens, moot court. And one of the questions 2 years ago was exactly this, that if some such organism is brought back for testing and it proliferates and it escapes, and then there's damage caused to a neighboring country and its fisheries, etc., there is a clause in the Outer Space Treaty that prohibits.
So, as a lawyer, you are right. There is a center for molecular biology. They know how to keep it.
Please.
I just want to ask this one question. Like you said that the bacteria that have been found on Mars, they have never been seen on Earth.
No, not on Mars.
This is only our atmosphere.
Okay. I just want to ask this one question that.
This is the third one question you're asking.
Okay. This is the third. This is the last one question that I want to ask. That when we talk about life, we talk about these 8 things that a living organism should have: locomotion, excretion, circulation, digestion, reproduction. So how are we going to decide that this like you talked about methane? Perhaps this particular organism that is living on Mars does not excretes methane, or it does not abides by this framework that we talk about when we talk about life. Like it does not inhale oxygen, or it does not exhale carbon dioxide, or vice versa. That's what I want to ask this.
What he means is does it self-reproduce without all the
Yeah,
other
understood.
characteristics?
As I told, you have gone into the domain of unknown. Even if we do this mission and no methane is there, it will not answer your question, because it needs several modifications, several experiments before deciding on that. The first cut is whether methane is there or not. Nobody could say methane is there, and the expected, so-called expected methane, as I told, is 10 parts per billion. Okay, very difficult to even sense it. If you sense it, the next question is where from it comes, whether the living organism, whether it is giving methane out or not. These are all much more unknowns. We are not into that domain yet.
This is a Rumsfeldian scientific question. It's an unknown. Yeah.
Professor Rao, this quest for finding extraterrestrial life has been going on. The nearest that we ever heard was, I think, again in Mars, I don't recall. There was some organism type, worm type things found by one American mission, I think. And there was a lot of excitement in the world, but it has died down. What exactly is the nearest approach we have had so far? Was that the one? Or is it still very, very far away to detect anything called life in the extraterrestrial atmosphere?
I am not aware of that, but still I feel no living thing was found.
There was
on
one
Mars so
some
far.
worm-like thing which was once very much in the papers and all. Nothing was proved. I know.
Correct, but that is under a cloud.
It's under a cloud. It got shut down, I realize, but nothing more has happened since then.
Yeah, just the
So
early
it's still
cloud which
nil,
catches the
actually.
worm. Anyway. Now, is there any person who has not asked a question who wants to ask? Before I move on, we're pretty close to the end. So is there anyone who hasn't asked a question want to ask? Okay, yes. A very short one, please.
Yeah, very short. I want to say congratulations, it's a wonderful thing that you just showed us. But how does NASA feel about it? Do they feel threatened by your interplanetary exploratory desires?
Absolutely no. Let me tell you, JPL is the organization behind MAVEN mission. And both of us are supposed to reach on 24th. We collaborated and phased it so that there is a 2 days time gap. And they use our deep space network at Bailalu in Bangalore, and we use their network. And believe me, every week we have a dialogue with them. So it is going in a cooperative mode, not in competition mode. Because we supplement each other.
And do you have a self-destruct mechanism on board just in case this gets captured by some foreign interference or something?
No.
There's no such kill
But
switch.
no, particularly by Martians, we have no. Last question.
Because Mars came on 24th September back. So is after point of the educational point of view, is anything available on to public domain so the science technology can improve in India? So many career development can be possible, I think.
Yeah. See, if you are asking public domain, we ourselves have a Facebook. All students can see that. There is a Twitter and there is a ISRO website. And I request you to go to ISRO official website.
Thank you all very much for this attention. Would you kindly, there was a fascinating lecture about something which ought to be known on a much wider basis in this country. And if those of you who go out, would you also please convey to your friends and others that what they have missed by not being here today. And I want to thank Dr. Koteshwar Rao, particularly how simply, as was mentioned earlier, he has explained a complex maneuver, both organizational maneuvering and real spacecraft maneuvering, which has really been a culmination of all that ISRO, as we have come to expect from the organization that we have called ISRO. Please thank him again. Thank you.